good morning. This is Coffee with Grant. I'm Grant. This is Coffee. This is Ruby Dog. Hello, Ruby Dog. Good morning. Yep. Oh, hope you guys are well. I am doing all right. I've been doing a lot of thinking about, well, it's not that I wanted to, but I'm doing a lot of thinking about politics. And I wanted to try to distill conservative politics down to something that made sense. Because right now it doesn't really make sense. It seems like the values that conservative politicians have said that they value for a long, long time don't line up with how their actions are behaving. And so I tried to do a little bit of a thought experiment and ended up coming to an interesting realization. And so today's topic, I stretch my articulators. Yeah, I'm still groggy. Today's topic is about in-groups. And I really think that the notion of xenophobia and the defense of your in-group makes a lot of sense in the context for why a lot of society is the way that it is. And it's kind of hard to parse when you've grown up in an environment that is trying to be inclusive. Inclusivity is a new thing in the grand scheme of all of human history. Inclusivity and this idea that you would want to welcome people that are not part of your in-group, that are different, who don't believe the exact same thing that you do, that's a relatively new concept. So it comes down to, like, let's do this thought experiment here, and I want to look at a couple of issues specifically. But let's say you have a religious group. It really doesn't matter what type of in-group it is, but the way we're going to set this thought experiment up is we're going to go from like a top-down perspective. So you're in charge of the group, and your job is to keep it going and like defend it, and then also do some, chess moves, so to speak, thinking ahead to say, oh, what is going to give my group the advantage over other groups? And a lot of that math that's being done is how a lot of our legal system is structured. It's how people have thought for millennia. But the thought process goes a little something like this. One is that you want less outside influence. Because if you've got your group kind of on the same page and everybody has the same actions and they're doing the same stuff that you want them to do, you understand that there's a risk of having the more outside people coming in, and in many cases this is it's a reality, but it's also a misnomer, because the misnomer is that it's bad, that it will always be bad. Like, outside people coming into a set group is always going to change it in some way. So the assumption, where I think this is where we branch fundamentally on conservative and liberal politics on this issue, is that the idea is that change is, on the conservative side, change is bad, and on the liberal side, change isn't necessarily bad, right? They're not going to say that all change is good, but they're not arguing that, like, no, everything that could possibly be different than what I'm used to is bad. And so if you run into this assumption that every piece of change is bad, then there's some logical boxes we can check along the way. So we're saying, let's say I have a like-minded group of religious people who I'm in charge of, and I want to make sure that I defend, what we believe and how our lifestyle is. And as the leader of this, whatever it is, I am pretty okay with how it is right now. And I want to make sure that I don't welcome in any extra new radical ideas that could bring about change. Again, it's change averse. So we look at something like the abortion argument. Okay, this is something that as somebody who's been, an observer of society and trying to figure out the motivations that move people, it didn't click for me on abortion because it seemed like the pro-life people were ignoring a huge tool in their toolbox. And what I mean by that is that my experience growing up, going through adolescence and high school, and being raised Catholic, was this the notion was abstinence only. So it's like, don't have sex before you're married or straight to hell. That's and then it was also a don't get anybody pregnant, but the only way you can do that is by abstinence only. And then also, if you do accidentally get pregnant, the abortions aren't don't even like the things are scary, and you're gonna have the baby, and it's gonna change your entire life. And I went, okay, well, what is the goal? Less abortions, right? And so logically, if your goal was less unwanted pregnancies, the tools in your toolbox wouldn't just be abstinence. You would say, oh, what if we educated young men and women about the dangers of the real risks that are involved in premarital sex? What if we kind of took it for face value that teenagers have been trying to and successfully been trying and succeeding at having sex with each other since the beginning of time, and just saying don't do it is probably the least effective method anyone's ever come up with for that. We could accept that, and then we could also say like, oh, here are some other tools that are here's what contraceptives are available. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, there's a reason why these groups don't embrace those other tools, because it isn't about the number of unwanted pregnancies. It isn't. They don't give a shit if other people outside of their organization are having abortions. What they give a shit about is the change from the in-group. And so the idea is, generally speaking, if you were to think in generational terms, long term, not just like the immediate day to day, but if you're thinking in long multi-generational terms, you have to, the only tool you have is you have to scare your the adolescents growing up within your group. You have to scare them as much as possible about what could happen from outside. And the reason you don't want to endorse safe sex and sex education is because, generally speaking, whether or not it's a fling or something else, generally speaking, having sex with somebody tends to lead to affectionate feelings for them, right? So it's like, for as much as you're going to avoid unwanted pregnancies with birth control, you're probably going to get a few marriages where people want to be together. They want to couple off. That's just how it's going to work. And so the entire anti-abortion pro-life argument isn't about lives of an unborn child. That's secondary to saying you need to be so afraid that you don't disrupt the status quo of this group, that you don't go outside of this artificial wall we've created and bring someone back in who could bring about change that we don't like. And that's where I see the liberal side of things right now kind of being on the other side of this, where they go, oh, actually, and honestly, conservatives have kind of chased liberals into a corner, which is like, it's such a weird place where it's like, because there's going to be a reaction. So you have basically chased liberals up onto the moral high ground, and they've just decided to stay there, and you don't have it anymore. And so the idea is to say, now you're saying, LGBTQ people aren't people, and they are not valued in society, and many things. They're like, oh, not only should they have legal protections, we should be actively persecuting these people. And the liberals are like, they're people, and they're interesting and diverse and wonderful to be around, and you clearly have never spent any time around anybody different than yourself, and we're just going to be like, yeah, diversity actually makes us better. And the diversity making us better is a crazy new concept if you're comparing it to things like the Catholic Church, right? It's the only way you get out of nationalistic territorialism And I mean, and basically feudalism with extra steps. It's the only way you branch out from nationalism into globalism. And globalism is the only way you get to a post scarcity society where people can actually use like we collaborate across the globe on projects that are greater than uh, that advance all of human civilization. You have to be on the same page across the whole board. If you're not, then there will always be war, there will always be conflict. And again, we don't have to look at this in the religious context, but I found that very interesting to say that, yes, on one portion of it, it's to say that, oh, well, we're against abortion because killing babies is wrong, which feels like a really easy thing to defend, right? But on the second part of it, you go, oh, if killing babies is wrong, then why are you not ignoring this other thing in your toolbox to say these are tools that are proven highly effective for getting what you want, but if you don't use that tool, you clearly don't want that. What you want is for people to be scared. You want pregnancy to be a real threat and a deterrent for stepping outside of your in-group and for turning down potential romantic advances from somebody who is outside of that group, and you want it to be a tool in your toolbox for that and not for anything else. And if you lose that, then you start to lose hold on what the adolescents are doing, and since they're going to define the next level of your group and how the future goes, you want to instill this same sort of thing. And so if we look at things like nationalism, that's where we see a lot of this pushback, right? So we see this whole thing where it's like, oh, look at Brexit, for example, right? Now, in hindsight, widely considered real dumb. I'm sure, because the way that the media functions nowadays, and it was like, we're going to for Brexit, and I'm not a British national, so I don't have that sort of national pride. I don't give a shit. But it's an interesting thought experiment from this side of the pond, in that you could say, oh, okay, well, there was clearly on paper a huge amount of benefit for the UK to be part of the European Union, like more benefit than negative. And so the idea that it's such a powerful motivating force to say, no, they're eroding what it means to be traditionally British. And so we deserve the right to have our own currency and to, do all these things, et cetera, and so forth. Never mind that it was a better life financially, for trade, for all sorts of economic reasons, for like safety, and that step towards globalism where we can eventually get along. All that was better pre-Brexit when they were part of the European Union. But it's that nationalist thing where people can convince you that change is bad and that the world around you is changing too quick and you don't have a place in it anymore. And this boils down to a bigger argument of what we're seeing, which is you can easily be manipulated by people who tell you that. The world is going to change. The world is much different. Like right now, the world is a completely different place than I grew up in. I mean, like, and I have the nostalgia goggles on for the mid to late 90s, like you wouldn't believe. But at the same time, it was a sort of different, it was a golden age to be a kid. We were in like the height of like Nickelodeon game shows had just been invented. There was a promotion for all sorts of it's like there was a McDonald's across the street from a Burger King on every corner, and every single one of them was trying to pander to children with free toys that you could get in different meals for whatever your fandom happened to be, and they were just trying to throw as much stuff at kids in the 90s as they possibly could. And it was awesome. It was a good time. The 90s had its problems, but I did a deep dive. This is completely derailing my current argument, but I did a deep dive into, would somebody in 1999 have more rights than they do now? And the answer is that conservatives have won a lot of their talking points over the last 26 27 years. And so, yes, you would actually have more individual protections uh, in 1999 as a citizen than you would now. And I can do a thing on that. I did like a side by side, but it's really depressing when you look into it. So we're talking about this, like the adversity to change and the defense of your in group and what that can be. And so if you are a nation, the US, I thought for a while, was more insulated towards this idea because from its founding and over the history of the US, it's always had ethnic diversity. We've never had a core group, and I'm including Native American populations, which were decimated in that. We've never had just a solid homogenous group of people who all share the same religious and all share the same ethnic background. Compare that to like a nation like Japan, which is 98.2 whatever percent ethnically Japanese, where there are still people in small villages in Japan who have never seen a non-Japanese person. The US is completely different in that, where you're in an environment where you see all these different either little cultural boroughs, you know, you've got your little Italys, you've got your etc., your Chinatowns, and you grow up in that environment. You go, this is America. Like we are, you know, traditionally a melting pot. We are a melange of all these different cultures come together. And when you base the foundation on that, it's a lot easier to embrace change. That's why I think our America's slow descent into fascism isn't going to work, is because you can't play with fascism in a vacuum in this way and remove all the cultural elements that people like about the diversity and chip away at it and then expect everybody to be like, yeah, we want to listen to only Lee Greenwood and Kid Rock. And you're like, really? No, I'd rather have diverse music and diverse food, and then people being like, that's not the kind of music that we listen to. And I'm like, well, that is insane. As a musician, I have never run into any musician ever who has said, no, my music is only for this group of people. It is, every musician I've ever run into has been like, cool, if you enjoy it, welcome aboard. That's what I made it for, was to have it be appreciated. So the idea that you would, in this culture wars vitriol, come out and say, no, we as a group, trying to defend their in-group again, we as a group don't listen to that type of music. We don't eat that type of food. We don't dance that type of dance. And you're like, oh, well, those are all the things that humans come together over. Right? But it's we don't watch those types of TV shows or movies. We don't like that type of comedy. It's the culture wars just sort of shaving away where the boundaries are. And what you're doing is you're going to just shave away everyone, because people love the diversity of different cultures. Really. And it is one of the easiest ways to come together to cross those boundaries, and that's, I think, where maybe liberals have this advantage of saying, okay, we're gonna start with a base of change isn't always bad. So if you're doing that with a change isn't always bad mentality, and then you start looking at going, oh, okay, well, we've got a lot of immigrants coming into my community. If it's true that change isn't always bad, what are the good portions of that? And then you start to go, oh, okay, well, the good portions of the labor economy, but not only that, but the good portions of the culture and the work ethic and all the other things that, like, immigrants are always going to come in and build a restaurant. Like, every immigrant group has at least one restaurant somewhere. So it's like you add new food options and new cuisine options to your community. You add new cultures and festivals and new celebrations and holidays and dances and new things to learn about and new things to celebrate about people. And for some people, that is incredibly scary. The idea that you'd be like, oh, what if my daughter doesn't marry somebody in our group and she goes over to the strange group that I don't know and falls in love with them, and then I've got, you know, mixed race grandkids. Like, so what, man? Love the shit out of your mixed race grandkids. Like, it isn't the end of the world, and that's the misnomer, is that change is always bad, or change can be sometimes good. I'm not going to argue that change is good all the time, you know, but being open-minded and not trying to paint everything with a broad brush. But that's the metric that we're up against. Almost every single one of those things boils down to being change averse and trying to defend the status quo, trying to build up as much weight and inertia in how life is right now so that nothing changes. And that's a dangerous place to be, because it can lead to, first of all, what it leads to is this idea that it is your group versus the other groups, and that bad things are okay, and bad systems are okay to still exist, provided they don't immediately affect your group. Which is why you see these incredibly wealthy Republicans who don't give a shit about solving homelessness. They inevitably, what you see, homelessness is a really interesting example, because homelessness is a symptom of a broken system. There's too many S's in there. But homelessness is a symptom of the system working the way it's intended, right? So if you have a housing market that is determined by the free market, you will get homelessness. That is how it works. Someone will have to be priced out. That's so, like, if you're going for, this is the most that somebody can afford, that is how it will work, is somebody will not be able to afford it. That's the free market 101, and you will create homeless people that way. Republicans like to treat the symptom when it comes to homelessness, and that is, I don't want to see these homeless people, because they're okay with making money and having the rent, if they're, landlords, having the rent be as high as the market will allow. They just don't want to see the consequences of their actions. And meanwhile, see a lot of liberals who go, oh, well, we can not only we can treat the symptom, which is we can treat homeless people with dignity and not just at the hand wave, be like, can't we kill them? You're like, no, you shouldn't. You should say the intrusive thoughts out loud, especially if you're, like, I don't know, somebody who's paid to be on the news. You shouldn't, let's make that clear. You shouldn't think, like, can't we just kill homeless people? No, homeless people are a symptom of our failings as a society to put proper social safety nets and guardrails in place. We should see a increase in homeless people as an alarm bell to both fire up our own internal empathy and compassion, but also to look at the system and try to figure out what caused that in the first place and put some laws in place to prevent that from happening to people. And again, this is that thing. It's the defense of the in-group versus the defense of new change or diversity. And if you're defending your in-group, and your in-group is wealthy, affluent landowners and landlords and people who own buildings and people who are, shareholders in Fortune 500 companies, you don't give a shit about homelessness because it doesn't affect your in-group. And that's kind of crazy. And actually, no, it's not crazy. That is exactly how history has been built since the beginning of time. It is a new idea to care about people outside of your in-group. It is tough. It's more difficult. It requires empathy. It requires communicating with people who you wouldn't normally communicate with. And the more you do that, the more you realize that everybody, the artificial barriers that have been set up over generations are pretty meaningless in many ways. Is that all humans, no matter where they're at in life, no matter where they happen to be, on what continent they are from, or what stage they're in, are all trying to do just the same basic stuff. The first one is just get through the day. Just trying to get from day one to day two, figure out what it means to be human. Just like today, I was dragging getting out of bed. I'm already 2 cups of coffee in, and I can't, I'm tired. Just having a little empathy that the rest of the world is also tired, right? And part of that, you don't have to understand every single religion and understand every single culture to realize that, oh, that's something that we all can relate to, that everybody's just trying to figure this shit out, that we could give people just a little bit of leeway about their day, and that sometimes people are going through some awful, awful stuff that you can't fathom. And it's not that difficult to show people empathy, or even just be like, oh, okay, hey, I get it, you're not at your best right now. It's not that hard. That's literally the first step to getting along with globalism, is just to be like, hey, we have to be able to identify all of the things that bring us together and that we can align on, and stop trying to point out where the artificial lines are in the sand and scare people away from trying to cross them. Because it's not just that. It's the if you are a young I was like, I was gonna propose this thought experiment, but no good is gonna come from it. If you were gonna, I was gonna say, if you're a young adolescent and you're in a very conservative religious in group, so your community is all the same religion, and they're, you know if you're conservative, just, yeah, float the idea of going outside of your in group and marrying somebody from a different race, a different religion, a different, completely different culture, and just see what people say. And the answers are going to be very much either coded or not coded. It'd be like, no, we don't do that, or those people bring XYZ, and they'll have this excuse. And then you can go out and go, oh, well, let me do my own little thought experiment and see if that's true. I'm going to go attend a thing, go outside and meet new people and try to prove. And that's kind of what I did systematically over my life, has been going, hey, what if I try to don't just take the stereotypes that people give me at face value? What if I go out and I try to find my own evidence, and I try to meet people where they're at and talk to them like I respect them, and ask people real questions about what they're going through. And then what I've learned is to go, oh, now I have this bank of personal experience that you cannot discount with racial stereotypes. I know enough now to go, oh, well, that seems like you're painting with a broad brush. There might be one example that you are harping on, but that doesn't mean you get to paint an entire community that looks a certain way with that label, and that also doesn't mean you get to just discriminate against everybody that matches that description because of your one example. People are just trying to get through their day, They're trying to find out where their next meal's coming from. They're trying to plan. Everybody, like, I haven't met a single person who wasn't A, exhausted, B, trying to do the best for them and their family, C, trying to figure out, long-term, like, financial stability and figuring out the complex nature of what that is. And yeah, some people have been given some really bad information on that front, right? It's like some people, they go, oh yeah, well, what's your idea of financial security? It's like, I'm going to win the lottery. Well, the odds of you winning the lottery are infinitesimally small, but you could actually put some money away and do some really good financial, like, other financial decisions that give you tangible results. And yeah, it's not going to be as flashy and as intoxicating of a mind idea as winning the lottery is and walking away with $400 and something million, but it will give you financial security enough to get from day to day, to not feel like you're underwater, to reduce that stress currency, to be there for your friends and your family and the people you care about. Get yourself a puppy dog so that you can, have yourself a dog. Get yourself a dog. Are you struggling with the amount of stress you have in your life? Are you not sleeping well? Do you feel like you're constantly underwater all the time and, don't know what to do? Get yourself a dog. The younger, the better. Dogs are a lot of work, but the eventual payoff is worth it. Yeah. So this kind of turned into a discussion about inclusion at the end of the day. So I just keep an eye out for those triggers. It's For me, it is trying to identify where those things are. And it's also going like, you're telling me that by defending the in group so vehemently that you are willing to throw other people who you've never met or interacted with under the bus in defense of your own, tells me that we have a fundamental problem in this country of understanding empathy in other groups. And the reality is here is that your in group, as we've shown, can exist in peaceful co-harmony with other groups. Absolutely can do that. We can have so many of these different collected communities, of religious specificity, of ethnic specificity, of cultural specificity. You can have all of these groups. I'm not saying that they should all be dissolved and it should be just one big. I'm just saying that they can all play nice. They absolutely have the ability to play nice with each other. They just have to want to be building up, making decisions that don't just benefit them, that you go, oh, that would also benefit those people. And in doing so, it would benefit me. It would, and things like the Catholic Church, it's like the Catholic Church hasn't figured that out yet. They're like, what if we double down on our most controversial views? And instead, they could be like, what if we used our vast, unfathomable wealth? The Catholic Church has so much goddamn money. What if we used our vast, unfathomable wealth to raise the quality of life for everyone and not just Catholics? Maybe people would respect that and they would come over and they would be more Catholic. And then, no, we're going to just double down on our most controversial and change adverse rules and try to defend our in-group. And because that's what's always done. And I don't think any world religion is prepared or preparing anyone for globalism. And maybe there should be one. Maybe I'm working on it on the side. Who knows? All right, that's half an hour. This has been Coffee with Grant. Ruby, you got anything to add? No, just a little lazy tail wag? Okay. All right, you guys, be kind to each other until tomorrow.